Because a lot of these questions are so application specific that it's very difficult to answer these questions without the context of more information. But we are doing our very best to give you good direction, even if it is to come back with control correspondence or something like that. Okay, so let's start with our panel. And okay, you guys like me to beg, don't you? Okay. In the house, one question, please.
Yes. So how long would you recommend that we leave a withdrawn facility on the 356H? Is it in perpetuity, or can it be removed after it's acknowledged or approved?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if it's still, if the facility I'm looking at, if the approved facility is withdrawn before application is approved, then you still want to keep it. So based on that.
Can I ask a clarifying with that? So like post-approval, if a facility is withdrawn,
Right.
can it eventually be removed
Yes.
from the 356H?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Second question in-house, please.
Yeah. This question is for Ang. On 356H, the form itself says it's an application for manufacturing a drug product and our NDA. So what is the logic in asking us to include the information of the intermediate manufacturer's API and their testing facilities where we don't have any contact with them?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
See, 356H form is for manufacturing, application for manufacturing a drug product. Okay, and you're asking us to include the information of API manufacturers, contract test laboratories, as well as their key intermediate providers. What is the logic of this? Because as an ANDA applicant, I don't have a contract with any of those facilities of the API manufacturer.
Well, if you're referencing these if we're referencing these drug master, if you're referencing this drug master file, you're responsible for the facilities that are involved in that drug master file. If it's involved with manufacturing or testing of the product. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that you should be aware of what facilities your drug master file is using.
Is it not the DMF holder's responsibility because you're reviewing the DMF as well?
Well, but it's also your responsibility to know what the DMF provider is using for a facility.
Okay. So can I ask another question?
You asked me.
Okay, so regarding the supplements like CB0 or CB30, what is the expectation of the agency for us to hold the product before we distribute it when we file a 30 or CB0?
Can you repeat that question again?
CB0 or CB30, what is the agency expectation for us to hold back till we make a decision on the release of the product or not? So CB30, how many days you want us to wait? 30 days only or beyond that?
I'm sorry, for what?
The CB30, if you file, how many days you want us to wait for a decision to be received from FDA? Is it 30 days or beyond 30 days?
Tony, would you like to
Start
take
the answer
that?
for this. If it's a CBE 30, it's baked into the definition. You're telling us that you're going to be making the change and you're going to be implementing that change at the end of that 30-day period. After that, then the gamble's on you. If you've done your homework correctly, you can go ahead. And of course, for the majority of the quality ones, we're actually seeing OPQ ahead of the 30-day response. So many times there won't even be ambiguity. But that's what the difference is between a PAS, a CBE 30, and a CBE 0.
But we get an email that CB30 is granted, but no action letter comes. Even sometimes, we receive after 8 months, 9 months. That approval of the CB30.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, we grant them within the 30 days.
Yes.
But as Ted mentioned, it's upon you to make sure that, you follow whatever regulation. And yeah, I understand you're saying you don't get the approval for later on because there's no goal date for a CBE. But again, it's upon you to make sure that, even though we're granting it, to make sure, it's going to be, everything's okay with the application.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, online question, please.
Right. First question is for Ted. Our experience is that FDA is using the late cycle amendment provision of the GDUFA 3 commitment letter and moving the goal date 90 days from the submission date of the response amendment, even for minor questions when approval is received by the original goal date. Can you please explain the decision-making for FDA as to whether to apply imminent action versus moving the goal date for late cycle amendments? Or will goal dates always be moved for late cycle amendments?
I don't know how many questions were in that one question.
That's okay. I can go ahead and start, and if I miss something, then please chime in. First of all, not every late cycle amendment results in an extension. And we talked earlier about the imminent actions, right? That's a great example. We're using that 60-day period. There's a whole nother type that we didn't have time to discuss today, and that's where we do late cycle, but we still honor the original date. And so there's a whole host of issues that come into play, including what we think your response time will be, how much effort it will take us to respond, the criticality of the product, if it's a drug shortage or public health, then obviously we're going to try to do everything we can to fast track that. And so those are all the variables that have to be factored in. And then each discipline is sort of responsible for making their decision on when to go for the formal extension, the imminent action, or do it within the goal date. And of course, alternatively, and this is one, don't forget, we could issue the CRL, and for those who've been around a long time, in the old days, that was the only choice. If you missed dotting the I, we had to issue the formal complete response or the not approval letter for those who go back a long time. And so we've implemented these changes to help keep the momentum of the review team in place and try to minimize some of the more bureaucratic effort that goes into making sure that the complete response letter is very formal. It's an official document versus the informal IRs and DRLs. And so really, it's a successful program. I know that sometimes companies struggle with not knowing what type of change is going to be resulting in an extension or an imminent action. Work with your project managers. In certain cases, you may have to talk to the discipline project manager, but always start with the regulatory project manager, and he or she will direct you accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Let's go in-house with the mic closer to me here.
Great, thanks. Question related to the scope of the players. In the presentation, supplements were specifically excluded from the player process, which conceptually I get for the vast majority of supplements, but I guess where I don't necessarily understand whether it's a FDA policy decision or there's something in the statute that prohibits it is, why are new strength supplements also prohibited from the player process?
Yes, the decision was made based on resources available to the industry to appropriately manage. You might have seen the numbers of supplements. Please start with supplements.
Thank you. Let's go to the mic at the far end of the room, please.
So I have a question regarding supplements. In case where we can't decide if the change is CB0 or CB30, can we have like a formal discussion with FDA, the PM? Or do you suggest that we just go ahead and file the supplement and wait for a response?
Can you repeat the beginning part? It was hard to hear your initial statement.
So in cases where we are unable to decide if the manufacturing change for an approved ANDA would be a CB30 or a CB0, in that case, do you suggest that we go ahead and submit the supplement, or we have a formal discussion with the PM?
Well, I mean, you may have a discussion if you like. I mean, we're always available. If you submit it as a, CBE 0 and our reviewers, deem that it is not, then, we'll contact you and notify you that, it is being elevated to a CBE 30 or a PAS. So, regardless if you submit it as a particular supplement and our reviewers, feel that it is not in that category, we will notify you of the change.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask another question?
I think Ted had Ted, were you going to add to that? Ted, were you going to add this? No?
I can add one more comment. The starting point too is look at the Code of Federal Regulations 314.70, where they give you some examples of what would qualify for all three types of supplements, but they do call out the difference between a CBE 0 and a CBE 30. And then there's also some series of actual guidances too that get into other examples. So use those as a starting point before contacting the team, but certainly, as Stephen said, the team will be glad to work with you to help get you into the right path. And if you submit it incorrectly, then there are mechanisms in place to reroute that as the correct type of submission.
Okay, thank you.
If you have another question, let's go to the online first. You can stay there. Online, please.
Okay, a question for either Andrei or Andrew. Will a player be denied if submitted less than 30 days from shipment date, even though the goal date is within the 60-day allowable timeline?
No, the player won't be denied, but that was a recommendation to submit it no less than 30 days.
Okay, thank you. Mike, closer to me, in-house.
Hi. So regarding the cover letter attachments, is there a threshold where you would expect this to be used? We've previously only used something like this on larger PAS or new applications, so it was a little bit of a surprise to hear that you recommend it. It sounded like for almost everything.
Yes, for the cover letter attachments, we recommend to use it for all submissions, all amendments.
Even annual reports and such?
No, not with the annual reports.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mike 2.
This question is regarding 356H forms. So in case where we're no longer using an API manufacturer, can we remove this from a 356H form if it's a pending ANDA?
Can you repeat that question, please?
So if we're using, for a pending ANDA, we're no longer using an API manufacturer, can we remove it from a 356H form? And we already have another API manufacturer which we're using.
I'm sorry, I still.
She's asking if they're pulling a facility off, do they have to keep listing it on 356H if there's another replacement facility in place?
You should include that you're withdrawing that facility on your 356, even though you're adding an additional facility in its place.
So we need to formally write in a cover letter saying that we're withdrawing the API manufacturer, and then we can submit that in the 356H form.
Yeah, you should include. Okay. You should include an amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, online question, please.
Question for Stephen. When should we contact the RBPM versus the RPM?
Well, for original applications, the RPM is the owner of that project. So they are always the first point of contact. But for any quality information, you can always contact the RBPM. And also for supplements, which are managed by RBPMs, you can always contact us.
Thank you. Mike, at the far end, please.
Hi, I have a question regarding the plier process.
Can you come a little closer to the mic, please?
Okay, this question is regarding the plier process. So following the grant of a plier decision, if a CR is issued and it gets classified as a major, either at the time of issuance of the CR itself, it gets classified as a major, or following the submission of the response agency, reclassifies it as a major, then what happens to the product that is already shipped in, because the goal date would be an 8-month, it's not a priority application, then do we have to destroy the product?
If 6 months have passed and your product is not approved, then it will have to be either destroyed or exported.
If we get an 8-month, if we get an 8-month goal date, is there a provision for us to reach out to you and see if some exception could be made, considering that?
So the import process is very tied to the import bonds with the Customs and Border Patrol. So there's no exceptions to that.
So that basically means that it's truly a risk importing the product unless you know that grant decision is based following adequate review status and not just anticipated.
Correct. That's what Ted mentioned. I think it was Kim mentioned that it's very important that you maintain communications with your RPM because you don't want to take that risk, right?
Yeah, because a lot of times of late we kind of hear that the review discipline is not yet closed out, so the project managers cannot really give you a firm status, and they just say that at this point of time no major issues are identified. So based on that, a grant decision is made, but then later we see that there are questions that get reclassified as major.
Do you have anything to add?
I would say, as I mentioned earlier before, recently we were trying to kind of juggle that kind of stance that you were saying in terms of allowing for more maximal, granting of players, while at the same time understanding that, while we do grant more players, there is potentially situations like you mentioned where, we could potentially grant the player but may not be approved in time. So I think kind of what Andrei was saying, I think your best bet is to kind of communicate with the RPM, understanding the timeframes that we've set out. And, I haven't seen that many cases in those cases of a major. I mean, I think more than likely for minors, that rarely happens where you're kind of stuck in that situation. But I would say that kind of stick with that time frame, and my best advice would be to kind of talk to the RPMs and make sure to understand those time frames before you kind of submit that player, and then that you don't have to fall into that situation.
Thank you. Online question, please.
Right, question for Ted. Are you tracking the percentage of original ANDA submissions that are first cycle approvals? And if so, where can this information be found?
All right, so the question has to do with first cycle approvals. There's two sources of information. If you go to the standard OGD, which is monthly and now quarterly report, we will list the information, and then there is a specific subsection of the FDA track that goes into more data on first cycles.
Next online question.
Sure, a question for...
Go ahead, in-house? Sorry, let's do the in-house.
Sure.
So I have one question for Ed. Ted,
Can you step up to the microphone?
I have one
please?
question for Ted on the median approval times. I think slide number 14 of your presentation talks about the median this is regarding the presentation that you made on the median approval times. Slide number 14 refers to the percentage of approvals with different median approval times. Is that the number of approvals that have happened based on the year of receipt, or is it 50% of the applications received in a certain year are approved? How do we interpret that percentage?
Hopefully I'm hearing this right. It's very hard to hear up here, so I apologize if I'm not answering the right question. If you're looking to find out where we get the mean and median data, we're looking at the approval actions for that quarter and taking all of those. And that's why it fluctuates so much from quarter to quarter.
Not the quarter one, but there was one more slide about based on the year of receipt. I think from 2010 onwards, you have given what's the percentage of median approval times. For that slide in 2022 also, I see there's something listed for 50% as maybe 15 months as the median approval time. So is that the number of applications that got approved in that fiscal year versus the year of receipt?
if you're asking about the sort of set of 3 approval charts all in a row with different sort of extrapolations, that's tracking from the cohort of receipt of the original application. So if our first exposure, then we start to look, how long did it take us to approve sort of the fastest 5, 10, 25, 50%. And so it's by cohort of receipts. So you can look at the raw submissions for the year. That's what we're doing.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Online question, please.
Question for Andrei. If importation of drug product is planned in 2 separate shipments, is 1 player enough for both, or should we submit 2 players?
You only get 1 shipment, so it's only 1 player per application.
Next online question, please.
Sure. Another question for Andrei, actually. Please confirm if players are only indicated for medications for which the product is manufactured outside of the United States.
Is for finished dosage form drug products pending approval of the application from a foreign manufacturing facility.
Do we have any more online questions? Okay.
Yeah, okay. Another question for Andrew this time about player. If a player can be granted before the ANDA is approved, it could happen that the product is already imported but not in the final labeling, as this review is potentially not completed by the labeling division. How can this be managed? I understand that I have to repack the goods with the approved labeling, or is there any derogation that applies to goods imported under player?
So as I discussed during the presentation, we allowed for product to be minimally further processed. That will include labeling, changes to labeling, right? And that will all have to occur within that 6-month period where the product has been imported and receiving actual final approval.
Thank you. Online question?
Okay. Either for Andrew or Andrei, what teams are consulted before a player is granted or rejected?
So as I mentioned earlier, before a player is granted, the deputy director will consult with the regulatory project manager, as well as the discipline project managers, who also speak with the individual discipline review assessment teams to kind of make that determination whether a player should be granted or denied.
Thank you. Let's go to our in-house question.
Yeah, a question for Ted. This is regarding the goal date, the GDF goal date. Before the goal date, project manager updates that all the disciplines are complete and adequate. Then there's a question about RLD labeling update, and they ask us to update the labeling. And we update the RLD labeling, and the goal date is immediately pushed by another 3 months. So is there a mechanism to redress and to reconsider this push?
All right, if I'm understanding the question, what we're seeing is an application that's sort of maturing its way through the cycle, and then we're getting a late reference listed drug, the new drug, updating its label.
Correct.
So what we normally see in those situations is the applicant's responsibility, obviously, to make sure that the application has the most recent new drug approved, sort of replicate labeling. Obviously, there's permissible differences, but you're responsible for matching the RLD. So the vast majority of time, you're going to be sending us an unsolicited amendment to do that update.
They classified it as solicited amendment, not unsolicited.
Even if we ask you, which we will do if people are slow to pick up on it, the burden is always on the applicant to have the right one. Now, our labeling team does shift in the proactive mode, and they will reach out and remind people that there was a recent update and you need to get your labeling in. The vast majority of time, that's going to result in an extension. There's very limited circumstance where we're allowed to approve an application where the generic drug label is different than the brand. There is a little bit of wiggle room. You can go into the regs. It's called the J10 provision, but it's something that's historically seldom been used just because of all the different pieces have to be in place before the agency is empowered to make that change.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have a second question in-house, please.
Hi, thank you all for your presentations. They were very helpful. I have a question regarding one of our ENDAs recently. The goal date was missed, and the reason was given that there are some complex regulatory questions or issues that are being worked at, and we will be informed later. It's been almost a month since then. We haven't heard anything. So what do? We keep on reaching out to RPM, or agency will tell us something at some point? How does this work?
Certainly, if you're in a space where you're past the goal date and you've been communicating with regulatory project management, and you're sort of left with, oftentimes you'll hear a complex, or like to also call it thorny regulatory issue that has to be untangled before the agency is able to take an action. You can communicate with the regulatory project manager. Always, that's your best place to start. If it's something that seems to be languishing with the agency for an extended period of time, then you can talk to the regulatory project manager and they can help you sort of navigate internally escalating those. And we do have mechanisms where people more senior in the organization, myself included, will have frequent communications with the company and explain what we can. Oftentimes in that situation, there's very little that the project manager is allowed to say. It could be a case where there's something that has to potentially be changed with the reference listed drug. And so we have to resolve that issue first. And then, of course, there's confidentiality issues. We can't disclose it until the reference listed drug owner understands it and has made the change and updated the label or whatever the appropriate fix may be. And then that goes into the other part of the equation. Because it's outside of the immediate control of sort of the OGD OPQ team, then the timing gets a little bit more nebulous. And that's why they're not able to say on June 1st. We want to be very cautious with giving people a date past the goal date. We're only going to give a date if we're 99.9% sure that it can be met, because we know how important that is for folks. And we also know how complex things are on the agency, where one meeting may lead to another meeting, which may lead to another. And so it's not uncommon, unfortunately, that we do get into those places. So if you've talked to the regulatory project manager a couple times and you still need traction, or your management is coming down on you to show that you're elevating it, talk to them and tell them that you would like to. They're not going to be offended. We don't have a lot of these cases. We miss a small percent, but certainly in a program as big as this is, there's always several misses at any given time. Their experience, they're used to navigating in this space. They will not be offended if you ask to elevate it. We will always work with you. And then if you think that you're not getting the traction that you want, another source is you can go outside of the generic drug program to the CDER ombudswoman. She's very good. She'll be the detective, go in and sort of sort out root cause analysis. If we've done our job right on the OGD OPQ side of things, then she may come back with almost identical answer, because that's as much as we're legally allowed to say. But she will give you an independent assessment of the issue and whether or not the program is in fact doing everything in its power to move your application forward.
Thank you so much.
We have time for one last question online.
Okay. Question for the panel. For applications granted a priority review designation, should applicants include a request for priority review on all responses to discipline review letters and information requests?
A priority request should be included in each resubmission if an applicant is looking for a priority review, with 3 exceptions: drug shortages, public emergency drugs, and PEPFAR drugs.
Thank you. So that's the end of our question and answer session. Thank you to all our panelists who stayed for the last, and see you tomorrow.